Maharshi, the eternal Guru, A.R. Natarajan. A little in-depth study of Bhagavan Ramana's works can and should make one see the place of bhakti, devotion in his teachings. It would not take long to recognize that surrender to the Sadguru has a pride of place in his teachings, and it is devotion at its best. One can also come to understand the holistic nature of Bhagavan's teachings by practicing his method, for one is linked from the beginning to the self, to consciousness and bliss. The problem arises because one looks upon the Sadguru's body not the way he looks, but the way one looks upon one's own body. We identify ourselves with our bodies, which we know are perishable. We transpose this idea on the Sadguru. We identify him with his body and therefore treat him too as perishable. The physical ending is taken to be a full stop. However, the Sadguru is always aware that he is the self, which includes his body. He never limits himself by identifying himself with his body. In fact, the very purpose of his birth is to break this illusion by constantly drawing attention to one's true nature by providing seekers of truth with a path which would enable them to be free of this identification. Bhagavan Ramana exemplified during his last illness his attitude to the disease racking the body. This opened the eyes of the devotees as to what should be the correct attitude towards his body. In his Guru Ramana, under the date 20th April 1949, Cohen records as follows. A lady devotee wept much and went to him in tears and said, Bhagavan, you who are curing others must cure yourself and spare your life for us, your devotees. Once or twice he waved her off, but seeing her great concern, he said, Why are you so much attached to the body? Let it go. Even more, telling his firm reply to the surgeons who wanted to amputate his left arm to save his life. Let the disease take its own course. The entry against 1st May 1949 is so poignant and significant that it is extracted here. Dr. Raghavachari, the surgeon, advised the use of radium first. Today, however, he found amputation unavoidable, and at 4:45 p.m. he saw Sri Maharshi alone in the bathroom and told him, I want to be frank with Bhagavan so that he may know the real position from the medical point of view and direct us. There are two ways of finishing this case. The first is scooping out the flesh right down to the bone, which will render that hand practically unusable. The other is surer and safer, namely amputation of the whole left arm from the shoulder. It is now for Bhagavan to decide. Maharshi paused for a few seconds and replied, As I let you look after your body, you will please let me look after mine. Which made one or two devotees standing within earshot go aside and sob, for they felt that this decision of his amounted to a death sentence. Maharshi then walked back to the hall with supreme indifference. Though Bhagavan Ramana assumed the body as a part of divine drama, he was always the bodiless self, eternal and unchanging. Even in the early years of this century, Bhagavan Ramana revealed this through the vision he bestowed on a devotee, Raghavachari. This has been recorded by Narasimha Swami in the biography of Bhagavan Ramana, Self-Realization. The questions Raghavachari wished to pose included the following: "Will you please enable me to see your real form if I am eligible to see it?" What happened is best reported in his own words. My second question also being thus anticipated, I waited with eager mind for the third. After half an hour, I opened my mouth and said, "Just as Arjuna wished to see the form of Sri Krishna and asked for darshan, I wish to have a darshan of your real form, if I am eligible." He was then seated on the pile, posh, with a picture of Dakshinamurti painted on the wall next to him. He silently gazed on as usual, and I gazed into his eyes. Then his body and also the picture of Dakshinamurti disappeared from my view. There was only empty space without even a wall before my eyes. Then followed a whitish cloud in the outline of the Maharshi and of Dakshinamurti formed before my eyes. Gradually, the outline with silvery lines of these figures appeared. Then, eyes, nose, etc., other details were outlined in lightning-like lines. These gradually broadened till the whole figure of the Swami and Dakshinamurti became ablaze with very strong and unendurable light. I closed my eyes in consequence. I waited for few minutes and then saw him and Dakshinamurti in the usual form. I prostrated and came away. For a month thereafter, I did not dare to go near him. So great was the impression the above experience made on me. After a month, I went up and saw him standing in front of Skandashramam. I told him, "I had a question to put to you a month back," and I had this experience, narrating the above experience to him. I requested him to explain it. Then, after a pause, he said, "You wanted to see my form. You saw my disappearance. I am formless." So, that experience might be the real truth. The further visions may be according to your own conceptions, derived from the study of the Bhagavad Gita. But Ganapati Shastri had a similar experience, and you may consult him. I did not in fact consult Shastri. After this, Maharshi told me to find out who I was, the seer or thinker, and his place. One must emphasize again and again the words of Ramana. You wanted to see my form, you saw my disappearance. I am formless. Formless indeed, for he is verily the self. This takes one back to the years when Bhagavan Ramana was staying in the Virupaksha cave on Arunachala hill. His radiance was so dazzling that all other yogis and sannyasins also residing on the hill were curious to know who he really was. No ordinary mortal could have such compelling grandeur and beauty. So they thought. One of them, Amritanatha Yati, wished to know which great Hindu god was he. Was he Hari, Vishnu the Preserver, Sivaguru, Subramanya, or Shiva, the great yogi? Ramana, who would seldom even give a glimpse of his true stature, somehow chose to reply. It reads, "In the hearts of all, beginning with Vishnu, there shines as pure intellect, the Supreme Self, who is the same as Arunachala Ramana. Where then can there be a question of birth and death for such a one? He is the ancient one, the timeless one, for he is the fullness of consciousness." If one asserts the timelessness of Bhagavan Ramana and the availability of his continuous guidance to all true seekers even now, one is entitled to ask for proof, evidence for the basis for such an assertion. Here, one can look at the twofold aspect of a jnani. One is his boon-giving, wish-fulfilling aspect. In Ramana Gita, Bhagavan declares that a jnani has the power to grant prayers, fulfill desires, etc. in the same way as Ishvara, the God. This power was very much there in him when he was in the body. Whatever be the matter which was brought to his notice, be it sickness of family members or marriage of daughters or jobs for relatives and so on, divine action would automatically start, which would result in the wish being satisfied. Reminiscence of old devotees, particularly Subbaramaya and Devaraja Mudaliyar, mention several such instances. The question would arise whether these powers of Bhagavan Ramana are still operative even after his Mahanirvana in 1950. Yes, it is very much operative even now. The post-Nirvana miracles are just as many and are multiplying day by day. The second aspect of a jnani in his timelessness in the role of a Sadguru. Here, one should also pause and examine the nature of the relationship between the Sadguru and his disciples. Quite obviously, the spiritual evolution, the ripening of each individual varies. The Sadguru, who has a sure hand on the spiritual pulse of his disciples, never forces the pace. He is a past master in the perfection of timing. Using Bhagavan's analogy, like a spider which draws the insect into its web to feed at its own time, the Sadguru, who destroys one's ego, does so at the right time, which might extend over lifetimes. Hence, while talking about the Guru's grace, Bhagavan Ramana would sometimes refer to a passage in the Tamil Vedantic text, Kaivalya Navanitam, which reads, O Guru, you have been always with me through several births, ordering my course until I was liberated. One might also refer to the incident relating to a long-time inmate of Sri Ramanashramam, Major Chadwick. One night in Bhagavan's hall, there was some talk about reincarnation, just as Ramana was getting up from the couch for dinner. Chadwick remarked, Alan Chadwick was not born before, meaning with the same identity. Someone wrongly interpreted it. Responding to it, Bhagavan quickly replied, Oh yes, he has been. For what has brought us here again? The disciple's ego, Ramana's prey, will never escape his tiger-like grip. But when it will be chewed up cannot be predicted. The relationship is a continuing one. The death of the disciple or his rebirth makes no difference, for the Guru is eternal. In considering whether there is the continued presence of Bhagavan Ramana as Guru, one has to keep in mind the role of the Guru. He pushes the disciple within by initiation, which traditionally takes one of three forms: by touch, by look, and by thought. While in the body, Bhagavan Ramana used to initiate people through his piercing look of grace. One would be submerged into the peace which pervades when the mind is interned. To one pre-Nirvana devotee, Bhagavan Ramana more or less indicated that this was the method of initiation. Louis Hartz records the experience he had when he visited Ramanashramam on the way to Siam. It reads, Suddenly the Maharshi looked at me with great intensity. His eyes took possession of me. I don't know how long it lasted, but I felt happy. In the afternoon, I said, Bhagavan, I want your initiation. And he replied, you have it already. In the post-Nirvana years, this initiation through eyes is specially being done by Bhagavan Ramana through his photographs, which communicate a world of meaning. One has to remember in this context that the photographs of Bhagavan are not mere photographs but are full of life and capable of transmitting this power of initiation by look. Once a little devotion is kindled in one's heart for Bhagavan Ramana and his way, it would work wonders. Sometimes stern, sometimes gentle, sometimes smiling, but always radiantly focusing the power of the self. These live photographs instantly draw one by their compelling attraction. This attraction was there even when he was in the body, as is narrated by a Polish devotee who, in an account of the pre-Second World War days, says, I met him in a bookshop opening a book at random. Ramana Maharshi. On the way home, I opened the book several times to be sure that I was not dreaming, that this picture is as beautiful as when I saw him first. I look in sideways as if on the sly, afraid to frighten off the beauty, to lose it irretrievably. Several decades later, in the 1970s, a similar experience happened to one who had not the faintest idea about Ramana and his teachings. In Texas, USA, a person was moving from one business engagement to another when he was compelled by an inexplicable force to go to a particular bookshop, look at a particular shelf, and pick up a particular book. On opening it, he was overwhelmed by the photo of Bhagavan Ramana gazing directly at him. Instant samadhi and merger in the heart followed. Does it not suffice to highlight the power of Bhagavan Ramana to initiate by look, which has not reduced even a wee bit? There is also enough testimony for his guidance across the world through an inner voice, dreams, and awareness of his presence. In 1975, Ursula Muller was once plagued by heightening of sensate thoughts. Ramana Maharshi advised me how to behave and told me to simply drop all thinking. I succeeded in following his advice and was surprised how marvelously it worked. By his grace, I was able to forget the whole episode quite quickly. Soon, while standing with Bhagavan Ramana's picture in her hand, she heard him say in her heart, all bondage is thought alone. A year later, in 1976, Bhagavan advised her to drop concentration on the Anahata Chakra and go on by silence only. We have also the case of Fred Broadman. Maharshi's grace was revealed to him in a series of dreams and internal responses to some important questions during waking hours. There has never been a day when he is apart from me, but then how could he? He is the real self that abides in my heart. While a seeker Dali was standing in a bus stop queue, he felt the strong physical presence of Bhagavan Ramana, which awakened the awareness of the I current in him. Ramana also counseled him through dreams which were quite different from ordinary dreams, which are only mental projections, since direct experience was communicated through them. One can go on and on, for there are more than 50 such heartwarming and clear accounts of Ramana as the Sadguru, which the devotees have shared with us through the years, from 1964 to 1986 in The Mountain Path, published by Sri Ramanashramam. Bhagavan Ramana is always at hand as the Guru, taking the disciples' responsibility and leading them onto the wonderland of silence with firm and timely guidance. Whatever be the reason as to how and why he enters one's life, once he does, all search ends. His grace envelops and fills every pore of one's being with bliss. The individual, the disciple, is lost in the vastness called Ramana. The mind gets vibrantly silent, immersed steadily in the self. Om Shri Ramanarpanamastu. Ishvaro Gururatmeti. God is the same as Guru and Self. A person begins with dissatisfaction. Not content with the world, he seeks satisfaction of desires by prayers to God. His mind is purified. He longs to know God more than to satisfy his carnal desires. Then God's grace begins to manifest. God takes the form of a guru and appears to the devotee, teaches him the truth, purifies the mind by his teachings and contact. The mind gains strength, is able to turn inward. With meditation, it is purified yet further and eventually remains still without the least ripple. That stillness is the self. The Guru is both exterior and interior. From the exterior, he gives a push to the mind to turn inward. From the interior, he pulls the mind towards the self and helps the mind to achieve quietness. That is grace. Hence, there is no difference between God, Guru, and self. Bhagavan Shri Ramana.